Welcome to the Southeast Asia Oration. This event is designed and delivered by Asialink and the Asia Institute at the University of Melbourne with the support of the ASEAN-Australia Centre. My name is Sabrina, I'm the Diplomacy Programs Lead, and I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping tonight. Tonight we are joined by an esteemed Indonesian leader, Dr. Sri Mulyani Indrawati, and let's all give her a round of applause. She's at this year's Southeast Asia Orator. Sri Mulyani will be giving her oration tonight, and it will be followed by an in-conversation session with Asialink CEO Rachel Thompson. We will then have time for some of your questions after the in-conversation with Rachel. So to formally open tonight's program, I would like to call on Fiona Hogarth, head of the ASEAN-Australia Centre, to give the welcome remarks.
Good evening, everyone, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're meeting in beautiful Naarm on the lands of the Wurundjeri, Woiwurrung and Bunurong peoples of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to elders past and present, and warmly welcome and acknowledge First Nations guests joining us this evening. I'm Fiona Hogarth, head of the ASEAN-Australia Centre at the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade in Canberra, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to the 2026 Southeast Asia Oration. It's wonderful to see so many distinguished guests here this evening, and I'd like to particularly acknowledge the Asialink Advisory Council members, our long-standing partners and supporters of Australia's engagement with Southeast Asia from many organisations here, our advisory board members from the ASEAN-Australia Centre, and rekan saya, Bapak Konjen RI, Bapak Johannes Prasetyo, welcome to you as well, and to any other members of the Consular Corps here this evening. The 2026 Southeast Asia Oration is an important forum for regional dialogue, and the ASEAN-Australia Centre is very proud to be supporting the Asia Institute and Asialink at the University of Melbourne. Previous orators from Thailand, and of course last year we had Nobel laureate Maria Ressa from the Philippines, have challenged us through their orations to think differently about our region, about Australia's place in the region, and about global trends. So on behalf of the ASEAN-Australia Centre, I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Sri Mulyani Indrawati as this year's orator. Thank you for being here. Governing for Growth, Democracy and Development in Southeast Asian Countries. Tonight's oration will speak to some of the most important questions facing our region: sustaining growth, delivering shared prosperity, and building resilient institutions. These are questions that matter deeply for both Australia and Southeast Asia and will shape our shared future. Australia's relationship with Southeast Asia has never been stronger nor more important, built on decades of partnership, trust, and genuine people-to-people connections. And it's so wonderful to see so many representatives of the Indonesian student population who are studying in Melbourne. Welcome, a special welcome to all of you. Relationships are never static. They require continued investment in dialogue and learning from one another, even more so in the dynamic global context in which we find ourselves. And events like these are designed to foster conversations, strengthen understanding between our peoples, and create opportunities for open discussion and genuine exchange. They remind us that our region is strongest when we listen, work, and learn together. The ASEAN-Australia Centre was established right here in Melbourne, actually, in March 2024, at the ASEAN-Australia Special Summit to mark the 50th anniversary of Australia becoming the very first dialogue partner of ASEAN. The mission of the Centre is to deepen understanding and connections, building relationships, networks, capability, and long-term engagement through 4 pillars: Southeast Asia literacy or Asia capability, economic linkages, education, and cultural and community connections. So thank you again for being here tonight. We're really thrilled to see such a great crowd. I hope you enjoy what promises to be an insightful and thought-provoking discussion. and it's now my great pleasure to invite Penny Williams, PSM, from the Asialink Advisory Council and former Australia's Ambassador to Indonesia from 2021 to January 2025, to introduce our 2026 Southeast Asia Orator. Thank you. Terima kasih.
Thank you so much, Fiona, and good evening. What a wonderful crowd. I had to move to a bigger theatre. I have got the easiest task of this evening because there's no one in this room who doesn't know Dr. Sri Mulyani Indrawati. In fact, if you Google up rock star, it comes up with Dr. Sri Mulyani Indrawati. It's in the financial press as well. But I just wanted to talk about her from my experience of being ambassador, not just in her reputation. You all know that she was finance minister for 14 years under 3 presidents. That's something quite remarkable. And for those of you who may be not as familiar with Indonesia, it's really important to contextually know that she is not a politician. So the challenge of doing that role and not being a politician, but being chosen on her capability, her capacity, her intellectual expertise, and I would say also her global credibility. She took Indonesia through the Asian financial crisis, the global financial crisis, and also COVID. Her senior roles in the IMF and the World Bank also have given her a broader perspective than just Indonesia, and she's played a hugely significant role in the region, within ASEAN, in the region more broadly, and globally. But the thing that really I felt when I was in Indonesia was that she wasn't just managing the economy in a disciplined, prudent way. She was a reformer, really driven to the future. What needed to be fixed, what needed to be done to set Indonesia up to the future. And I would say that she's also been a reformer regionally and globally. She also... She's also made a huge difference to the bilateral relationship between Australia and Indonesia, and it's often unseen. It's not necessarily up in highlights of sort of diplomatic relationships. She has had a personal relationship with, I don't know how many treasurers we've had in that period, maybe 7. It's embarrassing to count. But she did have very personal relationships, and she was saying today she could pick up the phone, and I saw that. Pick up the phone, text, solve problems, work out what was going on. She was today in a meeting, she was very humble about it, because actually I would say she has also mentored our last couple of treasurers, and that they really valued her insight and her very calm mentorship. I think she likes actually institutional relationships between agencies in Indonesia and agencies in Australia. She's been very strong in really locking those down, but also academia and expertise, relationships that I didn't ever think, well, that often people overlook when they're thinking about the bilateral relationship. I think she likes us a little bit. Her daughter studied at this university, so she likes Melbourne quite a lot. She's a big coffee drinker and always talks about the coffee shops of Melbourne. So it was always lovely to have such a senior minister in the cabinet who was genuinely wanted to drive the bilateral relationships. But the thing that really stood out to me, and it's not the thing that you read in the CV, it's her personal attributes. She is known as being tough and driven and disciplined. But most importantly, and for the Indonesians in the room, you'll know what I mean by this, she's orang baik. And that means in English, good person, but it's something more than just good person. It means that she has integrity, she's humble, she shares with her staff, she's not caught up in her own self-importance, she cares deeply about Indonesia and its future, but very much, for those of you in this room, about the young people. And she cares about inclusive development, and she very much cares about gender inclusion. So for me, it's her personal attributes as a woman ambassador in Indonesia, as a representative of another country, that I just think were absolutely stand out. As I said, just very humble, orang baik. So tonight she's going to talk to us about things, and I don't know what you've been feeling, but I just feel sort of jangled by conversations around the world, the region, the future. What does it mean? Where do we put our efforts? What do we need to think about? There's so much coming at us all the time through the media, through social media. So tonight, to have someone as highly regarded, as intellectually able, who's got high emotional intelligence, to actually give us her insights and her thoughts about what this region, what ASEAN, what East Asia looks like over the next little while, and perhaps give us some thoughts about what we need to focus on, I think is absolutely a gift for us all. So we're so pleased, Ibu, to have you here. It really is a delight to welcome you to Melbourne University this evening to speak to you, and the floor is yours.
So generous, thank you. Thank you so much. Very, very generous. I don't think that I have somebody who introduced me in such a very generous and very touching way. So thank you, Penny. Good afternoon to all of you, my colleague, distinguished guests, and of course, all students coming here. It is definitely a pleasure for me to be here at the University of Melbourne. Ambassador Penny mentioned about my daughter spent her university years and graduated here in this university. So the city of Melbourne and the University of Melbourne took great care of my children, my daughter. So I would like to express my thank you to all of you. And if you talk about Melbourne, the weather in Melbourne, having 4 seasons in a day, this is just like the today's global environment, in which we have 4 geopolitical shifts every day. So perhaps this is exactly the right place to talk about it. Today, rather than trying to predict the future of Southeast Asia or ASEAN, I would like to discuss how we can govern and also shape it. I have to be reminded by this slide. Okay, there you are, it's worked. For more than 4 decades, East Asia, including ASEAN, has been one of the world's greatest development success story. With rapid industrialization, export-oriented growth, and taking advantage of globalization through integration of global value chains, East Asia, including ASEAN, has lifted hundreds of millions out of poverty and transformed many economies within this region into middle-income countries, even for several achieving high-income status. Yet, if we look at those success stories, the foundation of this success story are now changing. East Asia is aging rapidly. Global trade is slowing and becoming increasingly fragmented. Technological change, especially artificial intelligence, is reshaping comparative advantage and threatening jobs. Climate change is intensifying pressure on food and energy system. At the same time, the society, people, are becoming more demanding. Citizens expect not only economic growth and jobs, but they also expect better public services, stronger and reliable institutions, greater transparency, and a higher quality of life. So the central question today is therefore no longer how East Asia can replicate growth, the model which is quite successful in the past, but how can ASEAN sustain this prosperity in an increasingly uncertain and fragmented world while avoiding middle income trap. I would like to address 4 important aspects in this forum. First, ASEAN must redefine its growth model based on productivity. The second, human capital and technological capability will determine future competitiveness. Third, resilient institution, fiscal discipline, sound economic policy and regulation. And finally, the fourth one is regional cooperation will be decisive for long-term prosperity. So let me talk first, the export-led growth to productivity-led growth. The traditional ASEAN development model relied upon 3 very powerful forces: abundant labor, expanded global trade, and integration into global value chains. For decades, this model generated remarkable results. But the international environment has fundamentally changed. Since 2008 global financial crisis, the world trade has been slowed down. The growth between 2012 to 2015 is only 3%. This is less than half of the growth before global financial crisis. We are witnessing a profound shift in the global economy, in which trade growth fell below the global GDP growth. And this is not temporary. This is cyclical downturn. This is not cyclical downturn, but a permanent structural realignment of the global commerce. Global value chains have reached its geographical and physical limits. China rebalancing of its growth model away from investment-led or export-led into a more domestic consumer demand-led will have an implication on the lower import elasticity for raw materials and intermediate goods. The industrial automation and advanced robotics have significantly reduced the comparative advantage of labor-abundant economy. And also, this is going to be the threat for the latecomer industrialization in which some or quite significant ASEAN country is still actually at this stage. The weaponization of trade and investment interdependence has also created a fragmented global trade system. Supply chains are now increasingly shaped by security and geopolitical consideration rather than cost, efficiency, or comparative advantage. We are now hearing about friendshoring, nearshoring, export control, industrial protection, subsidies. Technological competition are now replaced by all those security considerations. So we are facing with a more fragmented and restricted globalization. When the global trade is no longer become a certain instrument for growth and becoming fragmented, the future growth of Asia or any country should more rely on productivity. We remember Paul Krugman in his 1994 essay titled the myth of Asia miracle. He argued that ASEAN economic growth was driven by perspiration, that is factor accumulation, rather than inspiration, that is total factor productivity. So the productivity, unfortunately, has been declined in ASEAN, especially since the ASEAN financial crisis 97-98. The total factor productivity growth has steadily declined and decelerated, and this is showing a structural handicap or problem within the ASEAN. Within the ASEAN or East Asia or ASEAN in this case, the most productive firm is usually the one which is rely on R&D, research and development, product innovation, that's securing access to advanced international technologies. We can really see a lot of very sophisticated institution or company. But within the economy, there are most or majority of the labor force concentrated in a small, highly informal and low productivity sector, especially in agriculture and also retail services. So to address this gap, government should aggressively making sure that dismantling domestic trade barriers and creating the business environment to a low-cost transaction or ease of doing business and improving investment climate. Sounds very, what you call it, recommendation which is you are familiar with. But this is the area which is quite challenging for many countries. And for formal sector, which is actually given a lot of subsidy and support, government must transition their industrial policy away from providing subsidy toward building a more vibrant ecosystem that will reward technological adoption and greater investment in research and development. Productivity growth must become a broad-based rather than concentrated among small number of globally competitive firms. The second one is artificial intelligence and human capital. Perhaps no development will reshape Asia more profoundly, or not only Asia, globally, than artificial intelligence. AI presents an extraordinary opportunity in optimizing logistics, improving manufacturing efficiency, strengthening healthcare system, you name it, modernizing agriculture, expanding financial inclusion. For aging society, AI can also partially compensate for shrinking workforce. AI also presents important risk on the other hand. Many developing countries, including here in ASEAN, have relied upon labor-intensive manufacturing as the first stage of industrialization. With automation, will threaten precisely this entry-level job, hence require a changing in terms of how they are going to design. This will require a complete rethinking of education policy because this is the core of human capital. Across of the ASEAN country, educational access as one of indicator of success is actually expanded dramatically. But educational quality has not. Many employers report persistent shortages of technical, managerial, and digital skills despite growing number of university graduates. I hope this is not the graduate from Melbourne University. Technical and vocational education and training should become an equal pillar of higher education rather than just a secondary option to address skill mismatch. Government, university, industry, we call it triple helix, they have to jointly design curricula that will reflect this changing labor market due to the changing of the technology and especially AI. The future of education system and curriculum must be redesigned, emphasizing on digital literacy, data analytical, and complex engineering fundamental. But equally important, this is not only about technicalities, the education system should foster foundational soft skills on a cognitive flexibility, unstructured problem solving, cross-structural communication, teamwork, and collaborative leadership. Actually, Fiona is wearing a scarf which is motif with batik. I'm not wearing batik, but I have it in mind. If you follow many of the batik, it's actually very unstructured. That's why I would say that the Indonesian, which is actually familiar with this unstructured pattern, is actually have a bigger chance to be successful in the era of artificial intelligence. Come on. You are the younger generation, you should believe in yourself. So this is really important. Yeah. So human capital is no longer simply a social investment. It has become a principal driver of national competitiveness. But significant investment or even higher spending on education, it is necessary but not sufficient. We need to pay attention on the better educational quality, a more effective quality delivery, and improve learning outcome. Third, the institutional foundation and the role of state in the 21st century. We always talk about market forces versus the role of state. Market remain powerful mechanism for allocating resources. But we also recognize that market failed to provide every public goods that is required for any country to transform. Relying solely on the market will systematically underprovide foundational infrastructure due to the high barrier to entry, positive externality, and coordination failure. This market failure could also exacerbate social and regional inequality. So the role of state is important to allocate capital for long-term infrastructure, correct market failure, and environmental degradation through progressive regulation and instrument, regulate market via transparent antitrust framework, and in coordinating national policy across banking system, education, private sector. Speaking from my own experience, we always quite careful in designing and defining the role of state, because I know that the state can also fail to perform what we expect. The strategic role of state will certainly require a competent, professional, and high integrity institution which is supported by civil servant with the professional and technical competence. I do hope many of you who's been sent by Indonesian scholarship is going to be qualified of this competent that is going to take care of the public institution. We also need, you can clap for your own institution. They certainly need an accountable political system that will avoid state failures and elite captures. This is a pervasive problem in many developing countries. So the strategic role of state requires also what we call it the macroeconomic stability and fiscal discipline. A sound macroeconomic, it seems like boring but obvious. Any country who doesn't have this kind of stability at the macro level is going to continue have to deal with the credibility issue. Sound public finance, strong and clean governance and institution, fiscal sustainability are essential. Deep and persistent fiscal deficit in which combined with unsustainable public debt will definitely crowd out private investment. Credible fiscal management and monetary authority will strengthen confidence that is essential for investment and the future growth. So strong and trusted institutions, therefore, matter as much as strong policy. It is not only about policy, but the institution which is good and reliable. The last one is the importance of regional and global cooperation. History has told us that every economy that escaped middle income trap and successfully transitioned into high income status did so by integrating more deeply into regional and global markets, not by isolating itself. We can see the Japan case, Republic of Korea, Singapore, more recently Ireland. They become prosperous not by maintaining behind closed borders. They embrace competition, technological transfer, investment, and international cooperation. ASEAN, providing those platforms, the regional integration for ASEAN is no longer just a trade liberalization. It is becoming the strategy for improving productivity. It's also become a strategy for resilience. ASEAN today represents one of the world's most dynamic economic regions, with more than 680 million population and a combined GDP exceeding $4 trillion US. Indonesia is about 25 to 30% of ASEAN. ASEAN has become the 5th largest economy globally. It is greatest comparative advantage, which lies not only in a young population, but strategically located in a geography, and now within geopolitical tension, it's becoming even more important. And ASEAN is a very diverse in terms of the population as well as the member country. Diversity is the strength of the ASEAN. Different states of development create complementaries. It also allows to specialize while also remaining connected. It allows knowledge, investment, and technology to flow cross borders. And most importantly, it also enlarges market encouraging firms to innovate and achieve economies of scale. I was the MD of the bank as a COO, and I travel quite a lot, especially in Latin America, but other regions in the world. And I can see that many of the countries, even at the same geographical closeness, they are not necessarily connected. Latin America is always like connected directly to the US rather than among themselves. And that's create vulnerability. This is just to show within ASEAN 10 and with East Asia in general, in which this region we are cooperate and integrate and try to develop the same policy platform, serving as a not only strong cooperation, but also resiliency and potential more on leveraging collective countries. The benefit of cooperation, it is not only contained within the ASEAN. Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP, in which Indonesia initiated, has created the world's largest free trade area. This is combining the 10 ASEAN, and now with Timor-Leste is 11, with China, Japan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. Our CEP demonstrates that countries with different political systems, income levels, as well as development model, can still cooperate under common economic rules. Covering around 1/3 of the global economy population, RCEP has created the world's largest trade area, free trade area, and its significance goes beyond just tariff reduction. In addition to RCEP, we have CPTPP, that is Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership. This also provides institutional platform for structural regulatory benchmarking and alignment. I always see this as a mechanism for a country to benchmark themselves in terms of policy, while at the same time also strengthening both the regulation policy and the institution. So the benefit of all this cooperation is certainly beyond not just the tariff reduction, that can actually combine more and accelerate the progress on a digital trade, intellectual property, investment protection, competition policy, services, government procurement, which has become the big issue, especially for Indonesia, which is big in terms of the budget, labor standard, environmental sustainability, and governance of the state-owned enterprises. If you look at all this, it's actually almost similar with the OECD requirement. So this kind of arrangement is going to provide a more clarity of the direction of the policy, competitiveness of the economy to enter this 21st century. It definitely also creates more resiliency of the regional supply chains, because with this RCEP and CTPPP, it will allow ASEAN economies to trade intermediate goods with one another without friction or with minimal friction. And this will create a more self-sustained, integrated consumer market. By having this kind of agreement, it actually creates more safety net economically in terms of trade and investment that is going to create a better opportunity for all economic players. For Indonesia, this is also becoming one of the vehicles in which we are not only just doing the downstreaming of strategic mineral, but can integrate with the regional electric vehicle ecosystem. battery manufacturing, automotive assembly, electronic production, and advanced logistical throughout or beyond Indonesia, but not only ASEAN, but beyond ASEAN. As you know, that the current global growth is mainly driven by military industries, AI, and all industry related to the AI, whether this is chip or energy, and also in terms of food and energy security. So with this kind of platform, it will definitely provide more certainty of the investment across country. So RCEP and CPTPP are complementary that will create inclusivity and bringing together the economic at different states of development to strengthen their production network. ASEAN should see these agreements not as an alternative, but they should be viewed as a complementary to the agreement or long-standing approach of the ASEAN, which is openness and inclusivity. Regional integration transforms comparative advantage into competitive advantage. And in uncertain world, deeper regional integration is no longer optional, but it is a strategic necessity. So in conclusion, I think that's why my voice is not. I have to take my bottle. Thank you, Sabrina. ASEAN stands at a historic turning point. The growth model that served the region exceptionally well in the past is reaching a limit. Escaping middle income trap is not simply about increasing the size of GDP, but transforming the economy into a quality of growth. This requires not only policy right, but also a stronger institution. When we talk institution, this is not only a public institution like government, but also corporation, firms, which is actually need to also continue adapting. Better education or human capital is obviously become one of the strong and very fundamental important of success that will allow greater innovation and also development in a more resilient supply chains. And above all, this could be and can be strengthened through deeper cooperation. This will depend on visionary leadership, capable institution, and collective determination to transform our today's uncertainty into more tomorrow opportunities. The future of ASEAN will not be shaped by the external forces alone, but it will be shaped by the policy choices that we make today and by our willingness to act on them. If ASEAN remain united, embrace openness, leverage this cooperation like RCEP and CPTPP, investing in human capital and technology, and championing in multilateralism, then ASEAN will not merely avoiding middle income trap, but also become the principal engine of sustainable and inclusive growth in the 21st century globally. I believe this is the opportunity before us and for many of you who's actually younger generation embrace this as one of the journey that will not only challenge you, but also provide you with the opportunity. Thank you so much.
you. Thank you, Ibu Sri Mulyani. Let's all give her another round of applause. At this point in the program, I would like to invite Ibu Sri Mulyani and Rachel Thompson to begin our in-conversation session.
Thank you again for such a superlative oration. Can we give Ibu Sri Mulyani another round of applause? So I wonder if we could start where you finished with your call for the need for ASEAN to champion a renewed multilateralism. And I was struck by your observation that proximity is not of countries is not a guarantee of cooperation, and you cited Latin America. I think you could also look, for example, at the European Union as evidence that proximity plus institutions and rules is not necessarily a guarantee of success. The EU has lost members at the same time as ASEAN has admitted its latest member in Timor-Leste. What is it that you think characterises, what is special about ASEAN's approach to multilateralism that is allowing it to navigate as you put it, the four geopolitical seasons in one day that characterises the moment that we are living through? And I guess going back to Fiona's reminding us of Australia being ASEAN's first dialogue partner, what is it that you think ASEAN as a forum needs from Australia as a dialogue partner if it is to be successful in embracing a renewed sense or approach to multilateralism?
Thank you, Rachel. Well, ASEAN, we call it the ASEAN way, is actually, if you compare with the other, especially the most obvious like European Union, which is quite a strict jacket rule, cooperation or organization, then creating a lot of bureaucracy and all those complications. ASEAN with non-interference is actually a quite unique combination between, okay, we are all together, but I'm not going to intervene, but you know that we have a certain principle that we are all agree. This is typical like an Indonesian. We love getting together, but don't intervene, I just want to share. But then, because we are meeting regularly, we feel like, oh, there is a certain principle that we are all need to develop. So that kind of flexibility fit really well with the current global stiffness, with all fragmentation, and becoming the strength of the ASEAN in a way. So what kind of multilateralism or multilateral arrangement governance that is allowing that individual country to actually develop, decide, have an ownership when they say that I agree, I'm going to embrace this one, integrate with this kind of principle. And they also have their own domestic political process so that ownership is not going to be top-down, one-size-fits-all, patronizing. This is all the word that is many developing countries quite familiar. We feel like, oh, we are ex-colonial colony, we are dictated, the Indonesian experience, we have the IMF, Kamdesu, like this one. All this is becoming something which is maybe, it's not really what you call principle, but it's become a real important topic, or maybe in this case, it's allowing for this country to feel the ownership of this institution. Not only the institution, but also the process and the principle that they are all agree. I think these are all which is very important. From Australia, and Rachel, I think because you are, Australian is very much Western country in the southern of Indonesia. So you definitely, in this case, not look at it wrongly, but look at it rightly in this case, that allowing this diversity to be actually exchanged with the ASEAN. I think many countries also acknowledge that the highest income status that the Australia achieved definitely have a recipe of success that we need to learn a lot. But at the same time, within the ASEAN or East Asia in general, they also see that, okay, we want to achieve, but in our own way or our own terms. This may be something which is a little bit less intuitive for the Western thinking, because I'm very familiar with that. I work in the World Bank and I know how the Western people thinking, Sri Mulyani, why you are going here and there? Because it is political process, so in this case. So the multilateralism that need to be developed in terms of the governance is should then allow this kind of certain room of flexibility without compromising principle. And that is something that I firmly believe it will grow even more stronger ownership, domestic ownership and political ownership by each of the member country. And that's why they are becoming more resilient. We know when this is like playing a kite, whether you are going to lose or you are going to, and that is exactly what I see as the maybe comparative advantage of the ASEAN that can be learned and studied, and in this case, maybe even adopted.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think it's been very noticeable how in the face of, moments of rupture, as Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney put it, or, whether it's turmoil surrounding global energy markets, the ASEAN approach has been to look to one another and to cooperate. And I think think about an initiative like the ASEAN Power Grid, which has been an idea that has been around for 30 years, but finally there is the right alignment of interests and sufficient trust has been built that it can now actually start to move forward with a degree of pace. And as you note, that is also the idea of trying to join together a lot of geographically dispersed energy grids is something we have experience with in Australia, good and bad. So maybe, and I know certainly an area in which there is opportunity for partnership. But you also spoke about the strategic role of the state, and the state does seem to be having something of a renaissance. At a point where even the World Bank will start talking about industry policy, something is up. And I couldn't agree more with your comment about the need for competent, professional, high-integrity civil servants, now more than ever. But reflecting on your experience as Finance Minister over an extended period of time, something that many of the counterparts you've worked with over the years on the international stage don't necessarily get as an opportunity. Can you help us understand a little bit about how have you gone about, how do you build that competence and professionalism and establish, systems that uphold integrity as a leader within a public institution like the Finance Ministry?
Well, building institutions definitely takes time, and the process is always very complex. This is remind me of my conversation when I first appointed as a finance minister back then in 2005, and I was still very young comparing to my top echelon, which is maybe 15 years older than me. I'm still young now, Rachel, in this case.
No question.
But on my initial conversation with my Director General level, which they are on top of their career, you feel proud working in the Ministry of Finance? Is this fulfill your expectation, not only in terms of income, but also your self-respect, dignity? And then they said, no, of course, we are perceived as a corrupt institution and all those things. And then, okay, so can we all agree, are we going to change? Because we want definitely to have a better institution. So reform is something that you cannot impose by saying that you should change or I'll fire you. This is something that, this is like the ASEAN way, you try to create an ownership of not only the objective that we try to achieve, but also the process. And that definitely takes time and takes a lot of your own attention as a minister. And don't forget, the job of Minister of Finance is managing the budget. It's also managing the economy, designing the right policies. So you also have to go deeper on your institution. But I think strengthening the institution should not only come using your own internal change or reform process, you also partnering with your external stakeholder, because it can create a good pressure. In 2005, of course, we don't have media social just like today. So we talk to the media, we talk to the stakeholder like the business community, academician, or even other like anti-corruption commission at that time. And we ask them to help us in building and creating the right pressure of improvement. So we announced we are going to change, for example, from like treasury function into the tax custom. These are all, this is the change that we are going to make or we are now making. Could you supervise and monitor us whether we are still on track and there is a consistency? Ministry of Finance is a big institution. At that time, 84,000 people all over Indonesia. So having a stakeholder helping us in building this consistency is also important. And also at the same time, providing the right incentive for my own staff in this case to do the right thing, because they are not only monitored by me and reporting all good thing to me, but also actually check. Today with the social media is even more savage, because before you sleep, you suddenly, many people will directly message me, Ibu, I haven't like receiving salary, but how come somebody cannot receive salary? Because we've already transferred. Or, Ibu, your tax system is actually stuck. I've already tried, I make a coffee, I tried, I didn't. Ibu, my merchandise is stuck in one pot. So all those things is actually becoming like 24/7. And I give this pressure directly to the WhatsApp group and saying that tomorrow, so my deputy knows that before sleeping at 12, they have to talk to their spouse saying that if there is thing which is minister, they have to look at it. And by tomorrow, I will check again. And that is actually helping quite a lot in terms of this feedback loop. But of course, social media also provide you with a lot of headache, of course, deep fake and all those things, which is actually quite a lot. So I think building institution is not something that you can prescribe. Maybe School of Management, they are going to, this is the element of changing the institution, providing motivation. But most importantly is actually leadership, which is not only at the top level, but also I always emphasizing the middle level leadership is very critical. As the quality of this republic is not depend on the minister, not only the Director General, that is Deputy Minister, but not even at the director level, but on the third and fourth, because they are the one who usually make the first draft of policy recommendation. And this draft usually become the final draft because the level above don't have time, or don't have time, not don't care, but don't have time to even look at it. So you can imagine that is really the quality of the country is really depend on that level. And they are the one who actually directly also manage the stuff. So I pay really very strong attention to all those levels so that they feel like, oh, okay, this is our collective responsibility and we have to work.
And I must say, having worked with many of your staff in my roles at the Asian Development Bank and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, I can attest to the impact that your leadership has had in that regard. I mean, finally, and this is your...
They scare of me.
Colleagues, this is your 5-minute heads up that this is my last question, and then we'll turn over to you, the audience. There's a phrase I grew up with in the Australian Treasury that I know is dear to your heart as well, that you should never waste a good crisis. Can you talk us through, and you mentioned some of the reforms that are needed both domestically and at a regional level, including the importance of removing domestic trade barriers, improving domestic competition, ongoing reform to support macro stability and fiscal sustainability. You know, these are all things which, you know, are dear to the heart of economists, particularly those of us who are practitioners of public finance. But often the reforms that are needed take on vested interest, require you know, people within the community to imagine very different futures for themselves and their families than the ones that that they thought would be their future. How do you think about what is the role of excuse me, again going back to public institutions, how do you make the case for much needed reform when the benefits may not be realised until the next crisis or a decade hence, but the political cost is realised in the immediate term?
Well, this is the main challenge of reform because which is actually with the analogy of our own personal health. If you do the exercise today, it will be healthier 1 month or 3, but the pain is today and the gain is maybe a little bit, not tomorrow, but long term. Reform is like that, and it's easier to say, but when you are dealing with the politics, meaning that the political implication is today, and that's why many governments in the world, not only in Indonesia, usually try to delay reform because they don't want to lose the voter, and that's make the country then, going to the wrong direction for long. We can see many countries actually entering this cycle of bad performance, lack of reform, but then you have this vicious circle, which is making the country even more worse. So at some point, you really have to take a risk, but should be also calculated risk. I think the role of the minister in this case is have to, of course, convince the president first whether this kind of reform needed and what for. As you mentioned about don't ever waste the crisis. There is no good crisis, it's always crisis. Don't waste it. When the crisis, usually the leaders feel that something is not right or something is wrong and need to be fixed, and certainly they want to escape from scrutiny of the people who feel the crisis, for example, like pandemic in this case, or global financial crisis, or tsunami in this case, or natural disaster. Whatever the crisis, it will create an opportunity for this reform to be actually pushed. But it's not really in a manipulative way. You should be very frank and quite detailed in telling both your boss, that is the president, the cabinet, the parliament, and then the people about this nature of reform. I think communication is very, very important. The second one is mapping who's going to actually losing this from this kind of reform and who's going to gain. Usually the gainer is just keep silent. The loser is the one who's going to be coming with the anti-reform. So you really have to make sure, in this case, it's understanding who's behind that is going to be anti and how to deal with them. Because this is not something like this is the total enemy that need to be destroyed. They are all people like us, business community, and all interest group. And the third is actually on the political negotiation also in this case, how much you want to pay to compensate, because without compensation, there is no way there is like, people is not going to be a statementship, oh, I love Indonesia, I want to do the reform. No, you really have to calculate and say how much you actually able to compensate in a, what you call it, justified way. For example, like fuel subsidy usually have a quite contentious. So we say that for the people who's going to suffer, whether from the increasing fuel price, this is going to be the compensation temporary for those, but not necessarily compensate full of them. So there are so many ways that you try to do the political communication and negotiation. The most difficult is actually how much you can sacrifice without compromising the principle of reform itself. Usually, you don't get the 100% win. I usually talk when I was in Oxford asking about the reform experience, and I do really like to tell many of the student or even professor, in the academic world, you can make a paper saying that this is first best solution, second best solution, third best. And I said, in the reality, the least worst is actually what you are having. So I said, does it mean that you are compromising? No. Does it mean that evidence base is not important? No. Does it mean that the technocracy just put it in the bin basket? No. You still need to have this kind of soundness of this principle, but you also need to be able to navigate politics. And this is one thing that I many times talk to many of the technocrats, my own staff in the Ministry of Finance. They always think that, oh, politics is dirty, is something. No, politics is politics. Democracy definitely have this pillar of political party and politicians, so you have to deal with it. And this is exactly what need to be, maybe just like on my part of the AI, this is how the unstructured decision-making and skill to assess the risk and the opportunity. That kind of leadership which is needed. Yeah.
Hear, hear.
But I must say that being minister is not a popular contest. So if you're thinking that you are popular in this case and always being loved, is wrong. I always say among many ministers of finance, the job is actually, you are going to be hated by many. So if they are equally hate you, that is your success.
I must say, I did often find things like G20 finance ministers' meetings or World Bank annual meetings were often a bit like group therapy for finance ministers. Yeah. Okay, now we're going to do this, we're going to go lo-fi when it comes to the Q&A. So if you've got a question, please raise your hand. We're going to take as many as we have time for. But we might start down here again, and then I promise we'll keep on going up.
Thank you, Ibu Sri Mulyani, for your wonderful talk. My name is Ken Setiawan. I'm from the Asia Institute at the University of Melbourne. I wanted to ask you about artificial intelligence, which is both, as you said, a challenge and an opportunity. And particularly, I wanted to ask about some of the challenges that you mentioned related to educational quality. If I think of Indonesia, some of those challenges are that geographically there's still unequal access to education. Teacher quality is an issue, low levels of digital literacy, and although, there is overall good gender equality, we also know that girls are still at much higher risk of dropping out of school than boys. So in that context then, in integrating artificial intelligence in the curriculum, do we actually also risk deepening inequalities rather than closing them? Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Should I respond? Yeah. Okay. I think this, talking about AI globally, this is creating quite a lot of discussion about the governance of the AI, whether it's the new opportunity or a risk of having this AI that is going to shape and change a lot of maybe society, humanity, and even in terms of the governance, that it's going to have a huge significance. So this is an issue that will continue require for all parties and especially policymakers to actually watch and follow. On the AI and education, and especially addressing whether this will create equality or inequality, I think there is like both have the argument in this case. One argument saying that, oh, addressing the diverse quality of teacher, you just change into AI so that it will cut short from the human quality or teaching quality into more universal. Other will argue that we are not going to just rely on AI in order for the student to learn. So that kind of thing. But the threat of inequality is really real, not only in terms of how this AI is going to be used, but also because of the fact that economy or household in this case, the AI will require infrastructure to be able to be used. In this case, you need to have an electricity, data center will definitely need quite a lot of this energy power. Data in this case is very important, so how you protect those data is going to be, so you have quite a lot of infrastructure that is going to make this inequality exacerbated or actually narrow. On the hard infrastructure, the country who can, I think now United States even investing more on energy. That's why they want to have a nuclear, fossil fuel. In Indonesia, just 10 years ago, when just before the crisis, before pandemic or even after the pandemic, at that time, the demand for electricity in Indonesia dropped. So PLN, that is our electricity company, said that, oh, Ibu, we have an excess supply. Now with the data center and so on, suddenly we need another 100 gigawatt within the next 5 years, which is, I think that's going to be a huge jump for Indonesia. So that will require money, that will require investment. So country who cannot invite for those capital will definitely lag behind. So you cannot access AI, you cannot develop AI, and that will also create a competitiveness issue. So infrastructure availability is going to be one of the area which is going to affect this equality or inequality, exacerbated inequality. And then soft infrastructure, that is policy, regulation, institutional capacity is going to be also very important. So I'm very humble. I'm not an expert in this technology, but I think I watch it quite carefully because this is have a huge implication on the global governance and regional governance, national governance in terms of the how society interact. This is really a huge, quite game changer for the world. But I agree with you, some of the problem can be actually attacked or solved using technology, including AI. And whenever we see this opportunity, we should use it. This is, for example, like the delivery of the teaching. I still remember, I think about 5 years ago, when we are really using a lot of this digital technology in delivering the lecture. In Indonesia, we have a favorite, very capable math teacher, which he can inspire his student. So we actually record the way he teaches, and that's easily can be then shared to many other schools. That kind of innovation is definitely the example of how technology can solve this.
Yeah. Terrific. Okay, so I think we had a question just here. Yes, you, ma'am. And then I promise we'll come to this side of the room next.
Thank you for the opportunity. Good evening, Ibu. My name is Tika. I'm a PhD student here. My question is, considering historically in Southeast Asia, the state has often been not only a regulator of markets, but also a major market actor itself. Given this dual role, Ibu, how do you think we should deal with the state's responsibility to drive productivity, as you mentioned in your first pillar, and then technological upgrading, as you mentioned, the second pillar, And where should we draw the line to avoid reinforcing rent-seeking political patronage, as you earlier mentioned as well, and inefficient incumbents in the region of Southeast Asia? Yeah, maybe that's my question. Thank you.
Draw the line is actually depend on what kind of competition that you can introduce or infuse within the economy or in the governance. I still remember, I think at that time, of course, during President Jokowi time, when he actually saying that why pompa bensin, or in this case, gas station in Indonesia, when it was dominated by only state-owned enterprise, it was like kumuh. This is like creepy and all those things, dirty. So he said, if I see many of gas station in Malaysia, in Singapore, it was like clean, attractive, and nice, gitu. So then we introduced the retail gas station that is allowed to compete. And then you have like BP and other, which is becoming very bright, clean. People, even if you are not going to fill the gas, you go there. It's actually to shop or to just go to the toilet and all those things. I mean, that kind of very powerful competition, and then forcing the incumbent to change. So when you talk about the incumbent or the existing interest group, if they feel that their status is not threatened, there is no way that they are going to change. Usually it's very rare, I don't know about many of you here, that people change because of from within, or tiba-tiba sadar, or you are tobat or something. Usually it is because of you are facing with shock or pressure or ujian or test, and then you then forced to think, rethink, reflecting, and then you change. The same thing like company and the country. And that's why in my speech I said many countries become an advanced high income, not because they are closing and immuning themselves from all those, but you embrace and okay, you really have to see those, and sometimes it creates loser, winner, but then you have to deal with that consequences and more on what is the appropriate political approach in dealing with that loser and winner. Don't forget, I think also the competition and globalization is also have a downside risk. What happened in the United States, this is just to give you one illustration. The first U.S. Treasury under President Trump 2.0, that is Mr. Scott Bessent, attended G20 meeting the first time when he just appointed, and then G20 meeting usually during springtime, at that time hosted by India. He attended with the speech that he's prepared saying that, oh, this Bretton Woods institution is becoming irrelevant and all those things. The US as the biggest shareholder, of course, have a huge say. And he also said that globalization is wrong. And that's make President Trump elected it because of this anti-globalization, American first, not the global first. And then when I intervened after his speech, I said, you know, this is really strange in this G20 forum. Usually the country who complain globalization is the developing country, emerging country, because we feel victimized from globalization. And tonight, we hear the most powerful, the biggest economy in the world feel victimized from globalization. There must be really wrong with the globalization. But that kind of statement is just showing that there is a, what you call it, draw the line. The political forces and those actually gaining or become the victim of globalization, they are real. They are people, whether this is labor, and you cannot just say that, well, everybody should adjust themselves. No. So a certain, what you call it, affirmative policy that is justified based on a certain political circumstances, something need to be done in order for us to be able to continue benefiting from this openness, competition, or globalization, but at the same time also allowing for the society to change or those who suffer from globalization to adapt. That is more like a globalization with the humankind value. I think this is something that needs to be continued developed.
Okay, I promised we'd come back over to this side of the room. So, so many hands. Maybe colleague just on the end here.
Hi, good evening, Ibu. My name is Roro. I wanted to ask you a question regarding the ASEAN Way. So I come from a background of public health, and I used to work in the Special Economic Zone for Health in Indonesia. And it seems that Indonesia is experimenting with medical liberalization, trying to establish certain regions as a spot for medical tourism, even though Thailand and Malaysia are already premier hubs for medical tourism. So I wanted to ask if you had a framework for how states can balance domestic capacity building without weakening intra-ASEAN trade or without inducing hostility among these nations. Thank you.
Well, this is exactly the anxiety or the risk that policymakers need to do. When you open, you definitely then have consequences. And the medical tourism in this case, are you going to allow to have the international hospital coming with all their foreign medical worker or doctors? And there is always like a resistance. They always like, well, the disease or penyakit in Indonesia beda dengan di Malaysia gitu. Masa sih? I mean, but this is really quite always the debate regarding the group which is going to be affected by this policy and how you are going to deal with that. I mean, I believe the medical tourism that you talk about, oh, because Malaysia is already have, Thailand have, Indonesia should not have it or don't need to have it. It's not, of course, because Indonesia is a big country. You really have to have an option. But this is not to be seen as like, oh, you're just opening up. I actually just heard from Heli that in Indonesia, we only allow 50 foreign lawyers to practice in Indonesia, 50. That means if it is already 50, there is no foreign lawyers can come to Indonesia. That's quite a protective in a way. I don't know about medical doctor in this case. I should check to Minister of Health. But this is exactly, you cannot practice until you can bicara bahasa Indonesia, atau if you are practicing in Central Java, you should bisa bahasa Kromo. That has become like the barrier to entry, which is non-tariff barrier. This is exactly what is going. You are not going to say, I mean, you should understand andap asor, sopan santun, unggah ungguh. That's actually legitimate because you're dealing with the people. So yes, lawyer, foreign lawyer, or medical doctor can practice in Indonesia as long as you become Indonesian in this case. That will make many guru bahasa becoming laku, of course, and all those things. So here in Australia, you also see a lot of regulation like that to protect a certain profession or industry. So at the end of the day, this is just like reform or change or regulation. And those people who promoting this policy can be easily become the target of a nasty attack personally. Oh, this is the globalist view. You are the whatever, the label. I actually suffer a lot with this kind of labeling. So you know that it is not easy personally and politically. And that's why you can really see this. I mean, if reform and change is easy, the world will, with 197 countries like Bu Penny, maybe 80% they are becoming wealthy and high income. The fact that it's only less than 20% of the world that become advanced, meaning that this is difficult. Just like if you are in his Melbourne University, if you got an A easily and become summa cum laude, is it all of you become summa cum laude? It is not. So this is just the test case that if it is easy, there will be a lot of countries that will be successful. So it must be very difficult. I always say that for a country to make a progress, you need a good policy, good institution, good leader, and the fourth is good luck. Right?
Excellent. We might give colleagues towards the back of the room. We have a hand up just in the middle over here. This gentleman in the what looks to be a University of Melbourne sweatshirt. Yes. Just while Eloise is finding her way to you with the microphone, I think your answer, Sri Mulyani, was a great example too of the importance of standards harmonisation and accreditation across ASEAN, which has been a long-standing ambition for the ASEAN economic zone.
Okay,
Please.
Thank you. So my name is Hakim. I'm a teacher from Lampung. And I really love the way you put the way we can transform our economics and everything through the concept. So maybe it's a bit applied. But as educators, I want to ask you, the way I saw it, it is totally applicable, it is logical, but how long will it take for us, for our future generations, to have the accessible skills to make those concepts to be applicable? How many decades? And in what costs we should pay for that? Thank you.
How long? I don't know, Hakim. But all countries will face with the same question. So it's not an exclusive only for Indonesia or the young generation of Indonesia, but some other country may have a much more advantage in terms of the starting point in this case. So yeah, if I understand correctly, so how long it will take for the human capital investment today, it's going to get the result in the future. This is exactly a very classical example of you are doing good today, it's not going to have the result tomorrow. Education will take almost lifetime even in this case. But if you starting from kindergarten to university or to TVET in this case, it will take at least 15 to 20 years. And there is no political leaders can survive 15 or 20 years. So that's why you can make today all the good investment, the result is going to be tomorrow. That's why the strong motive or the legitimate motivation is not that you are going to get the result tomorrow, but it's actually you do it because it's good for your country. When I was finance minister, I always say to my team in this case, this is linked to what Rachel mentioned about don't waste crisis. The Minister of Finance job is actually when the economy is good, when everybody partying, you have to do a very hard work because the party will not last forever. There may be a cycle of crisis. So when everybody happy, economy good, commodity boom, everybody actually enjoying time, you work really hard because there will be a time in which crisis or downturn will come. When the crisis happen, you work even extremely hard. So that's why you never have a holiday. So you can really see my face now is quite relief, right? So, because that is the kind of job you try to do a counter-cyclical that you see that you really have to prepare for any possibility. But this is exactly, you do it today. I'm also a person who believes that there is nothing is actually wasted. If you really have a good habit, it will reflect in terms of whatever, your personality, your career, your job, your recognition. Ibu Penny very generous telling that saya orang baik gitu. Hopefully that is not pura-pura baik. Karena kalau pura-pura pasti is only occasionally baik. So you have to be consistently baik. Meaning that whatever good habit, good character that you try to develop, good study, even though it's not going to be successful next year, that's is not a waste investment. It is a very important, valuable investment. So be always in the good side, working hard, build your character and personal ethic that is allow you to become a person that people can and the country can depend on you. Thank you so much.
Okay, we have time for just one last question. Perhaps just over this side. The colleague just here. Yeah. Yep, just up. Yes, Lucy, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for your speech. My name is Annabelle. I work for the Australian Treasury. We've been following a lot of the news and policy updates coming out of Indonesia. And I was just hoping to ask you for some of your thoughts and observations on specifically Indonesia's economic policy challenges, both domestic and international. Thank you.
With that, we could be here all night. And I promise no nepotism, Ibu Sri, by ending with a fellow finance ministry official.
Yeah. We can do it bilaterally in this case. Because it will take longer. And well, what I'm saying that the current global economic environment is actually providing a very strong opportunity for Indonesia as a country which is not only positioning geographically strategic, but also natural resource, as well as the direction of whatever you call it, geopolitical tension, military spending, AI. I mean, the AI will require chips, the chips will require many of the strategic minerals that Indonesia have. Australia is also positioned in very strong. So these are all the area in which the question how we can capitalize these opportunities with the right policy, right regulation, the right attitude, of course, and our right message is going to be very important for Indonesia to actually use this very, I'm sure if I serve long enough, so I know that sometimes ups and down in one decade is like the longest. So we know the US under Obama, US under President Trump, US under George Bush, that are like providing quite a lot of huge global influence, global governance, global direction, but also in this case, even the leaders within the other country also creating those kind of influence. So today, with this kind of leadership at the global level, you actually see the opportunity, the direction, which is maybe for President Trump, American first, and at the same time, the response to other country who then cannot rely on American as my friend anymore, so I have to do something. And that kind of a chain reaction creating this kind of opportunity. In short, I'm going to say that as also in my speech, whatever the opportunity first, you really have to make sure that your country have macroeconomic stability, that is fiscal, sound macroeconomic, because it has become a necessary condition, it's not sufficient. Sectoral policy or trade policy is going to be very important. For example, Indonesia have the downstreaming policy, but this is not going to be creating a permanent distortion, but more like attracting capital and innovation to Indonesia. That means we are not focusing and forcing or arm twisting, you should be here, but you are come here because it is rational, realistic, and that's why you have to look at all the policy that are allowing those rational decisions to come to Indonesia. So that's easier to say because I can say it in just half a minute, but I know as a minister, this is really big homework. So as I said, good policy, good institution, good leader, and good luck.
Well, I think the incredible turnout this evening and all of those excellent questions just reinforces what an important and consequential relationship Australia's relationship with Indonesia is, and you, Sri Mulyani, have been such an important and continue to be an incredibly important part of that relationship. Perhaps if we can just give Sri Mulyani a round of applause.
Because there is a, I just want to use this opportunity because you're coming from the Australian Treasury. Personally, I really want to express a very, very deep appreciation for me personally, because I always have a good friend in Australia Treasurer, personally also, but also institutionally. I actually engage or have a friend from Peter Costello, so many of you have not born when Peter Costello, until many Wayne Swan, George Frydenberg, Joe Hockey in this case, and also Jim today. So it's really a very good friends and can be relied to support Indonesia and the Minister of Finance. We have a high policy level dialogue. Many of my staff in the past has actually received scholarship. When I said, what can I help you, Sri Mulyani? Why don't you give scholarship to many of my staff? So you can help with your taxpayer money, but spend it here in University of Melbourne, which is, I think, is good for them. So I really appreciate that. And many of this, the institutional capacity building that I learned a lot. So I learned quite a lot from this country, from the Treasury, from personal and professional relationship. So I would like to use this opportunity to say thank you to you and all your colleagues in the Treasury.
And with that, it's my great pleasure to ask my colleague, the Director of the Asia Institute, Professor Andrew Rosser, to come and deliver a short vote of thanks.
All right, thanks Rachel. Look, I'd like to start by just acknowledging that we meet on the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Look, my main job in wrapping things up is to give a vote of thanks to various parties for making this event possible. I'd also, if I'm permitted to do so, just work in a short plug and make a reflection at the end. Now look, an event like this would not have been possible unless an awful lot of people did an awful lot of work. It really takes a substantial amount of labour and effort and commitment to make this event possible. And so there are a number of people that really I need to offer thanks to on behalf of the Asia Institute, Asialink and the University of Melbourne more generally. First and foremost, of course, is our orator this year, Sri Mulyani. Thanks so much for accepting the invitation to come and join us this year and giving such an engaging speech. Personally, I found it a very thought-provoking speech and really appreciated the views that you offered. You know, the world does seem to have been turned upside down in recent years with COVID, the rise of populism, growing protectionism, the Trump presidencies and so on. And what we need are some ideas really, not just related to Southeast Asia as a region, but more generally about how we can move forward, promote prosperity, stability and so on. And agree or disagree with the ideas that you mapped out, it's very, very useful to have them on the table so we can engage in the conversation that's needed. So thank you very much for joining us this year. Look, I'd also like to give a word of thanks to the ASEAN-Australia Centre and Fiona Hogarth, who's representing the institution tonight. It's great to have the support of the centre. You know, I think we've worked together really well to create quite a special event here. Penny Williams, thanks for joining us and giving us some introductory remarks earlier. At Asialink, there's quite a few people to thank. Not least, of course, is Rachel for you know, helping me and colleagues at the Asia Institute plan and organise this event. But I do want to give a really special thank you to Sabrina Alday and her team, Leah Carrick, Krista Jones, and how many meetings we have held, how many emails have been sent, but there have been a lot of them, and Sabrina and her team have really taken the lead in that respect. Look, this event, of course, was preceded by the Southeast Asia update yesterday. We drew in for that event, a bunch of colleagues from the University of Melbourne, a number of people from overseas, elsewhere in Australia, and I want to give my thanks to those presenters, many of whom, of course, are in the audience tonight. And finally, just a general thanks to everyone here for turning out and asking questions and participating in the discussion. It's really terrific to have you with us. All right, the plug. Look, a few years ago, Vaidi Hadiz, the former director of the Asia Institute, and myself set up a publication called Melbourne Asia Review. Each year we've held the Southeast Asia Oration. We've published a set of papers broadly around the theme of the oration. I would just draw your attention to the fact that there are already a set of papers published on the Melbourne Asia Review website, and there'll be a few to come, including, I'm hoping, one by Sri Mulyani herself. So please look out for those publications and give them a read and promote them through your social media channels and so on. All right, look, the reflection. This is the third time we've run this oration. As Fiona said at the outset, it's become an important forum for regional dialogue, an opportunity for an open conversation and genuine exchange. I would add to that, it's a really important opportunity to hear within Australia voices from Southeast Asia. They don't get heard very much in Australia, and so I think this event is playing a really important role in just getting those views out there and making them part of the public debate. It's also, I think, become an important event in terms of promoting the broader agenda of Southeast Asia literacy. An agenda that at the Asia Institute is something that we feel very passionately about and work very hard towards as part of that broader Asia literacy or Asia capability agenda. And I know that the same is very much true for Asialink as well. Each year we've run this event. It's drawn a really significant audience. It's engaged the media, and more generally, it's contributed to public debate. And leveraged attention, broader attention within the Australian community, which is really quite wonderful. I mean, I think it's become, quite a special event. I think we have something special here. I'm really looking forward to running with Asialink future iterations of this event, and I would invite everyone here to join with us as we take this initiative forward. Thank you very much.